Zion is the most unique athlete I've coached at Duke.
And athletically, the only comp I have is LeBron James.
This young man, 6'7", 285.
Physical freak of nature. The last time we talked about somebody in terms of physicality was LeBron James.
Without question, Zion Williamson is one of the most impressive freaks of nature we've ever seen step onto a basketball court, especially considering the fact that he's only at a collegiate level. He's 6'7" and 290 pounds, as fast as a guard, and has a 40-inch vertical leap that lets him do things like this. And this freakish athleticism is what's led people to believe that he has the biggest potential of any young player we've seen in a long time, and has been one of the reasons that he's been projected to be the first overall pick since his senior year in high school. People are saying that Zion Williamson has the capability of being this generation's next LeBron James, and that he's gonna come into the league and dominate right away. And as you can tell, these were all insane expectations for a man that's still only 18 years old. And that's why we need to understand that no matter what his potential looks like right now, there's still always a good chance that he never lives up to that hype, and a slight chance that he turns out to be a bust, at least compared to what everyone's expected of him. Like I said, one of the biggest comparisons Zion has been getting from fans and media is to LeBron James, and the fact that he's the closest freak of nature we've seen since him. But aren't we forgetting about Andrew Wiggins, and the fact that since Wiggins' senior year of high school, he too was called the closest thing to LeBron James, with the fact that he was a player that was 6'8", near 200 pounds, and had a 44-inch vertical. And this also led to him being predicted to be the first overall pick before he ever stepped onto a college court. But people have chosen to ignore this recently, and that's because Wiggins never turned out to be as good as everyone expected, which was due to the fact that he was by far the best pure athlete in the draft, but didn't have any unique skills and wasn't a great shooter. So when he went to the NBA with all the other elite athletes, he stopped looking as good. And there's nothing stopping the same thing from happening to Zion. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are aspects of his game that can make him great one day, but right now, there's no denying that he's gotten by solely due to the fact that he's the best athlete on the court at all times. And he doesn't really have any true skills that set him apart from everyone else. On top of that, like I said, he's 6'7", 290 pounds with a 40-inch vertical, which right off the bat sounds even more impressive than LeBron. But he really can't shoot, and he plays like more of a power forward, which if anything puts him as more of a Charles Barkley type player. But even Barkley weighed about the same and had a 37-inch vertical when he was at Auburn. And you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? Barkley still turned out to be a Hall of Famer. But you gotta understand, Barkley was a much more skilled player in college than Zion is right now. We will take into account though that Zion takes much better care of his body than Barkley did, and Zion actually looks like he's in amazing shape for his weight when Barkley wasn't. And speaking of his weight, if Zion gets drafted today, he's going to be the second heaviest player in the NBA right now, right behind the 290-pound GOAT. And we're going to get to see if he can use that to his advantage in the NBA system. But looking at these last 2 points of the fact that Wiggins didn't turn out as expected just because he was a freak athlete, and the fact that Zion isn't as skilled as he should be, let's look at the past few drafts and how they turned out. Starting with the 2013 NBA draft, where the first overall pick was, wait, hell no. Starting with the 2014 NBA draft, where, like we said, Wiggins was the best athlete, but the player that turned out to be the best was the one that was the most skilled since college, which was Joel Embiid. And even again in this past year's draft, as an example, where the best athlete was probably a guy like DeAndre Ayton, but Luka was the most skilled. And basically what I'm trying to say by this is the fact that skill translates a lot better to the league than pure athleticism does. Because no one makes it to the league without being some sort of an elite athlete. Alright, almost nobody. Just kidding, he's the GOAT. But honestly, no star in history has been drafted so high based solely on their athleticism and made a career simply based on how athletic they were. I mean, maybe you could argue that the exception would be LeBron, but even LeBron was way ahead of where Zion is right now. And since Zion's supposed to be the league's next big star, let's look at the clear amount of guys who are supposed to be the league's next huge star from the past few years, but have failed to live up to that hype. and there's been a ton of them recently. Once again, in 2014, fans and media said that Andrew Wiggins was somewhere in between Kevin Durant and LeBron James, and actual draft comparisons had him as a mix of Clyde Drexler and Tracy McGrady. Jabari Parker had been compared to Carmelo Anthony. The next year, D'Angelo Russell was getting compared to Penny Hardaway and was supposed to be the Lakers' new franchise point guard. In 2016, Brandon Ingram was labeled as the NBA's next huge superstar, being compared to Kevin Durant, and Markelle Fultz was supposed to be the next James Harden. By the way, comment down below if you want to see a video based on the worst draft day comparisons. But back to the point, there's a running theme here, that a lot of the players that have come into the league recently with these huge hopes haven't turned out anywhere near what's been expected, and there's been a ton of letdowns. But we're going to get into why that is, and if Zion will face the same fate in a minute. But right now, let's look at the chances that he ends up like one of those guys or not by looking how his current game can translate into the NBA. So let's say he plays small forward for either the Cavs or the Suns, whoever can take the hardest. Now, even though he compares better to Charles Barkley than anyone else, I can see his game fitting best in a small forward role. The only problem is he doesn't have a consistent enough jump shot. I mean, at Duke, he is shooting 67% from the field, making an insane 74% of his two-pointers, but is only shooting 28% from three so far. And the reason he's shooting almost 75% from inside the three is because most of his attempts are layups or dunks, and he really hasn't been shooting nearly as many mid-range shots as he should be this year. And I mean, he doesn't need to when he can get to the rim like he can, but that's not always gonna work. He's supposed to be in college developing his game and working on his weaknesses for when he gets to the NBA. And the fact that he still rarely takes too many jump shots tells me it's because he doesn't have a consistent one and doesn't want to hurt his draft stock. And I mean, usually I would say as a perimeter player, this is something that's really gonna hurt his game, but I mean, with the way Giannis and Ben Simmons have been playing, that argument's kinda turned out to be invalid. Plus, we do gotta give Zion props for saying he really does want to work on his shot and become more than just a dunker. And hey, at least he's actually not scared to take a three. Plus, he is a decent free throw shooter, and it's not like there's anything fundamentally wrong with his shot, so there is a chance he can still develop one. And then away from scoring, we do gotta admit that there are big upsides to his game, like him looking like a great rebounder, a good defender, and the fact that he has great court vision. But even with all that being said, the fact that Williamson still hasn't shown that he has any insane actual basketball skills does leave room to worry that he might not be as good as everyone hopes. And when I say that, I'm not saying that he's a terrible player or anything, but I'm saying in a few words, if you're describing Zion's game to someone, I mean, you'll say he's a freak athlete, a great dunker, and, well, that's it. And whether small forward works or it doesn't, there's always a chance that he tries his shot at power forward, especially with his comparisons to guys like Larry Johnson and Charles Barkley. But I mean, it's going to be hard for him to play that position, especially with today's standards of what it is, again without a reliable jump shot. If he does play power forward though, I could honestly see him translating into a Blake Griffin type player that dunks on everyone in his first couple of years, and then slowly develops the mid-range and three-point shot that he needs. And he would also have to develop his post game. The only problem there though is that he's 3 inches shorter than Blake. To be honest though, there's still the real chance that he enters the league and becomes a star and is just as good as everyone's predicted. But this video has been about the possibility that no one's talking about. And for him to truly avoid that possibility, that he enters the league and doesn't live up to the hype for years, or maybe ever does, I think it'd be best for him to stay a little longer in college. I mean, with today's standards, nearly everyone stays in college for only a year. But you look at all the people that I mentioned earlier that came into the league and weren't as good as people expected them to be. And all of those guys were only in college for a year. But on the other hand, now it seems that a lot of the guys that stayed at least 3 years in college and used that time to work on their actual basketball skills and learn the game have been able to develop a lot better over the years than the ones that haven't. And we're looking at guys like Damian Lillard, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler that have done that, as opposed to guys like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Nerlens Noel, Jabari Parker, and Andrew Wiggins, who all only spent a year in college and haven't been able to develop their games past a certain point, especially to the levels everyone's expected of them. Because I mean, in college you have an entire team of people that are there to teach you to develop your game and work on your weaknesses. But in the NBA, sure, the team's there to help, but in the offseason it's all on the players to develop themselves. But let's be honest, seeing that there's no real chance Zion Williamson stays in college for for another year, what does he need to do to develop his game? Well, after pointing out all of his weaknesses earlier, again, I really don't think he needs to work on his defense, because with his ability to block shots and how quick he is on his feet for his size, I think he honestly has the potential to be a great, maybe even lockdown NBA defender. But the number one thing that he needs by the time he's drafted is a somewhat consistent shot. We've seen his percentage on the threes that he chooses to take, but how well is he really going to do when teams back off of him and make him shoot? Especially at the NBA three-pointer. His freight train drives to the basket have worked in high school and in college, but what about when Kawhi Leonard's guarding him? You have to wonder if a guy with the height of most shooting guards, or small forwards, without much length, that's the weight of a center, really fits in the NBA, especially if he ends up not having a jump shot. In a day and age where the league's becoming positionless, Zion Williamson is really as positionless as you can get. So definitely comment your guys' thoughts on Zion, and if you think he'll be the NBA's next big superstar that everyone's hyping him up to be. And comment if this video's changed your perception of him in any way. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.